Welcome to the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, Local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Roaring. As always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. Have a little audio difficulty today, or actually technical difficulty today with my laptop and the microphone. So we're kind of doing this impromptu style, I guess, as I'm doing this on the app on my phone. But we'll get through it. Hopefully, it'll still be enjoyable and listenable. And Rick, with that, let's go.
Yeah, the goal is always listenable here, and hopefully this meets that mark. So we'll start with the Bengals. Skinny, another 1-point loss to the Ravens, 35-34 on Sunday. I listened to your recap with Trags. I listened to all types of things this week. And Skinny, basically what I'm hearing is a lot of talking, but I'm not hearing a lot of answers from the Bengals media types, the Bengals coaching staff, anybody really talking about this team right now. You and Trags talked on your recap podcast about how this team just isn't good enough to win close games at this point. I mean, we have enough evidence to make that statement. Given that's the case, and I agree with you guys on that, are we at the point where it's just like Duke Tobin and the front office simply have to be better when it comes to constructing the roster? Are we pointing back to the free agency class they just had and the past drafts they have and said basically this isn't good enough and that's the reason this team is where they are right now?
I think that's absolutely it, Rick. And I don't think complacency set in after they got Joe Burrow and T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, but that's kind of what it feels like, that they thought they were good enough to build the rest of the roster through the draft and then to go supplement through some free agents. And it hasn't worked. I mean, it just hasn't. Geno Stone and Von Bell were supposed to be an upgraded safety. They're not. 2 second-round corners are struggling, DJ Turner and Cam Taylor-Britt. Outside of Trey Hendrickson, no one can rush the passer, including free agent signee Sheldon Rankins, including last year's first-round draft pick Myles Murphy. On the offensive side of things, outside of Jamar Chase, when T. Higgins is hurt, you don't really have anybody else in the wide receiver room, and you're counting on Mike Gesicki or a running back. And, it almost that's where the sweeping changes, I think, have to come in this organization after this year. I'm not here to tell you they still don't make a run for the playoffs, because I think they do, Rick, because I think there's enough winnable games left. And the fact that the last AFC wildcard team is going to come down to somebody going 9-8, I think they can make a run. I think this season's still salvageable. I don't know if the future is, however, at the current rate that they're building the roster. They're doing a horrible job of roster construction, and no one wants to seem to recognize that fact in the organization.
That's been the biggest concern I've had over the last few weeks, is that we're trending in a direction where, yeah, this season may not feel good right now, but you better cling on to the hope that you have left for this season, because I'm not sure where they go from here. And the fact that we're now sitting here talking about they can't get drafts right, they've tried to make splashes in free agency. And honestly, when I look at this year's roster construction, that's my biggest issue with this team, is the fact that Geno Stone and Sheldon Rankins are flops, basically. I mean, that's your biggest issue. If those two guys were good, this defense would be at least passable, and this team would have won a couple of those close games by now, and you'd be in a much different spot. So when I look at it, I see that as the biggest issue. And going forward, I don't know how they solve that issue. Is it a being cheap problem? Is it they just don't have competent people in those roles problem? And if that's the case, is it because you're not paying them enough? You're not paying enough of them to be good? I don't know what the issue is there, and I don't think they probably do either.
No, but I think that starts with ownership to have to make those tough decisions and say, you know what, we aren't building the roster very well. We did cheap out in not maybe paying Jesse Bates. We did cheap out in maybe not paying Jamar Chase when we should have paid him. It almost feels like that once they got to the Super Bowl, it was, okay, we've got enough, and we'll just supplement a few things here and there, and we've still got Joe Burrow. Well, that was part of the conversation, the bigger conversation that Mike and I had after the game, of we're on opposite sides of the fence of Jamar Chase. And I don't think he fully understood my point, because most people are in the camp of, well, you got to sign him. You do, but if you're going to sign Jamar Chase and not be able to address the rest of the roster or do it through good drafts, you're going to be left with Carson Palmer and Chad Johnson. You're going to be left with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase putting up big numbers and not winning games. I mean, the Baltimore game was proof of that. Those guys, maybe Burrow could have played a little better on a couple of passes, but in theory, in the grand scheme of things, those two guys couldn't have played any better, and you still lost. And that's where it feels like this is trending. If you sign Jamar Chase and don't do anything or don't have the resources to do anything else, because I don't trust them to draft. The track record is there at the moment.
I don't know why this team's struggles have led people to the belief that you have to sign Jamar Chase and you have to sign T. Higgins. If anything, I think it's the exact opposite. I think we now have proof that, hey, those couple of guys, those couple of receivers and Joe Burrow aren't enough for this team to be a top tier NFL team. And that's really concerning because I think most of us believed that if you just have those guys, it's enough. You're going to have a chance every single year. And we've seen very clearly this year that that is not the case. So, yeah, you mentioned Jamar Chase. I want to ask you about him. Do you think, given the way he's playing this year, which is probably the best receiver in the NFL at this point,
Yep.
Do you think the Bengals made a mistake by not giving him his money this past offseason when he wanted it?
Yeah, I'm going to say I don't because again, you had him under contract at a reasonable rate, and I think that's just the way the ball bounces. And I know it's going to probably cost you more if you are going to sign him, but they had a number in mind. Jamar's camp had a number in mind. That's how this stuff works. The twain didn't meet, and now we'll see how it goes in the next offseason. And it feels like the complacency came that we've got these handful of guys, and that's enough for us. Yeah, you could argue, well, they weren't complacent in going out and signing Orlando Brown. No, I'll give you that. You weren't complacent in that. But, if then you're signing these high-priced guys, you're paying a left tackle, you're paying a quarterback, you're going to have to pay a wide receiver, you're paying Trey Hendrickson, then you better start hitting on draft picks, and you just haven't done that. And now you're at the stage of you're going to probably need a right guard sooner rather than later. You're probably going to need a center sooner rather than later. You may need a left guard sooner rather than later. I mean, you're going to need back to interior defensive line help, another edge rusher, a veteran corner. You've got so many needs at the moment that it's just not enough to say, well, we paid Jamar Chase and we paid Joe Burrow. Great. And then what?
I also don't know that we know that Jamar Chase has made himself a bunch more money than he would have had the Bengals sign him. Everyone keeps saying that, but that's not exactly how the market works for contracts.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You don't start at a certain number, then accumulate stats throughout the year, play really well, and the number just keeps increasing. The market is set by whoever the highest paid guy is at your position. And Jamar Chase, from what we understand, already wanted to be paid as the highest guy before he had this season. So if you're the Bengals, why not? If you're going to have to pay him as the highest paid receiver regardless, why not make him prove it this year and let him get through the year healthy and then give him the most money out of all the receivers? No. If you did that before this year when you didn't have to, what happens if he gets hurt? What happens if he has a bad year? Then you overpaid for something that it might not have been worth. Now, okay, it's clearly worth it. You were going to have to pay him as the highest paid receiver anyway. Now you have to pay him as the highest paid receiver, and it's obvious.
Well, I think it's a great point because the wide receiver market got reset this offseason, and I'm not sure who the next one is other than Jamar Chase to reset the wide receiver market, right? So right. It's not like suddenly you have to go out and sign him for $160 million because somebody else did it. Who else is there to do it? I mean, CeeDee Lamb signed, Justin Jefferson signed, Jamar Chase is in that category, if not higher than both of those guys. And to your point, you're right about that. People keep talking about, well, costing yourself more money. Are you? Maybe a little bit, but I don't think, again, if you want to be the highest paid wide receiver, it can be $1 million more than Justin Jefferson. And that's maybe where they were even in this past offseason, where the Bengals balked at that.
Yeah, maybe it's 20 million, Skinny, but maybe right. Jamar Chase and his people were already wanting 20 million more than Justin Jefferson this offseason. We don't know exactly where that number was this past offseason. So it's unfair for us to sit here and say right. they now have to pay him a lot more than they would have this past offseason. It might be the same exact number for all we know.
And that's where I go back to, again, it's all fun and games until guys start needing to be paid. And I'm not here to tell you begrudge them that they don't need to get paid. But, man, it's all fun and games when you got the stars on rookie contracts, isn't it? And then it all changes so damn fast.
It does. You mentioned, too, that this team is still alive in the playoff hunt. And, they really are. You look at NFL.com, it has them sitting at a 27% chance to make the playoffs right now. But it bumps all the way up to 39% with a win over the Chargers on Sunday night. They're also one game back of the Broncos, who are currently the team sitting in the third wildcard spot. And, by the way, they host the Broncos on December 29th. So if it's coming down, Skinny, Lance McAllister phrased it this way, and I thought it was a really good way to look at it. If it's coming down to the Broncos, the Colts, and the Bengals for that final wildcard spot in the AFC, which team are you betting on? Are you betting on the team led by Bo Nix, the team led by the combo of Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson? Or are you betting on the team led by Joe Burrow? Simply put, we all want to be negative about this team in Cincinnati, but it's a pretty obvious answer if you're an outsider.
Yeah, and the other part to it is you play a team with a losing record in Dallas, a team with a losing record in Tennessee, a team with a losing record in Cleveland. Those are three which should be wins. That gets you to, even if you don't win this weekend, that gets you to 7. You got Pittsburgh at home. That could get you to 8. And then you got Denver coming in, which would be 9. And 9-8 probably does it with the tiebreaker over Denver. So, as I mentioned before, while we're talking in negative tones here, this season is salvageable. I don't know where the long term is salvageable.
Well, and it's especially salvageable because of the way that Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow are playing right now. I mean, Joe Burrow was, again, just ridiculously good this past Thursday. Now, you can talk about a couple of decisions he made that you'd like to have back, I think. But aside from those two decisions, which were very costly, I mean, the throws he was making, the plays he was making to single-handedly keep this team going in that game, it's absurd that they can't find a way to win with this guy right now.
Agreed. I mean, to think of what he's done in the 2 games against Baltimore, and you're 0-2 in those 2 games, to think of the times this team has scored in the 30s this year and lost is insane. I think it's been proven that when they play good competition, they aren't quite good enough. I think that's now been proven. They're 0-5 against teams with a winning record this year. So I think that part's been proven. But that's where I go back to, you don't face a lot of those teams down the stretch here. You just don't.
And I know this is all part of it, but like as much as we say that, you are a very questionable and probably bad call away from beating the Chiefs.
Right.
You are a young running back fumbling the ball at an inexplicable moment for no reason away from winning 2 weeks ago. You know, I mean, like there's all these little things that, and that's your point, like they're just not good enough if those things keep happening. But in a lot of ways, it doesn't feel like it's a talent thing. It's a potential thing. It's a skill thing. It feels like they have the pieces to win these games and they just keep coming up short. So from a hope standpoint, do they still have a chance standpoint, it does feel like there's enough there if they can have the ball bounce their way a couple weeks in a row that they can still sneak in here. Joe Burrow had a very playful disposition at his weekly press conference with you guys this week. What did you make of that? Because he didn't sound that way at all after the game on Thursday, and understandably so. But what did you make of his sort of very talkative, very playful disposition?
Yeah, maybe the fact of listen, he's kind of been a Debbie Downer the last couple of weeks, and I think he's put a lot of pressure on himself that maybe this was a way to just say, you know what, we got nothing to lose. Let's just go out and play. That's kind of what it felt like. And the way he's playing right now, he should have a ton of confidence because he's playing really, really well. I just kind of took it as a guy that decided to not be quite as serious, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a way of, instead of continuing to put internal pressure or feeling the pressure, let's just let the pressure loose and go ball and see what happens.
He almost seems like a guy that might need that occasionally.
Yeah.
Need to take a step back and be like, all right, I mean, it's bad. You don't like losing, but it's not the end of the world. No one's dead yet. So let's trudge forward. This Bengals Chargers matchup, when you look at it, it's hard not to look at the Burrow Herbert matchup with the way those two guys are playing right now, right?
Yeah, I think I look at more the Bengals offense versus the Chargers top-ranked defense, to be honest with you, as a whole. But yeah, that narrative's always going to be there. The Bengals coaching staff openly, when even in the Senior Bowl process, really liked Justin Herbert. They had him in the Senior Bowl. They liked him a lot. Joe Burrow was the guy. Joe Burrow was always the guy. But I think they like Joe. I know they like Justin Herbert a lot. So yeah, certainly those two guys come out of the same draft class. That becomes a storyline. And to your point,
they're playing so well right now too. That's the thing. It's like we've gotten this far along. They've always been kind of linked together, and this year they're just balling out.
Yeah, and Herbert in a little bit less gaudy number manner, right? I mean, he's not throwing for tons of yardage, but he's been accurate. He's been very careful with the football. He's only thrown 1 interception all season long. He's doing what Jim Harbaugh asks of him in that offense. When you need him to make a throw, he makes a throw. He made some plays with his legs the other day in their win this past week over Tennessee. Their goal is don't turn it over. Our defense is good enough. We have a good running game, and we have a quarterback when we need him to make a play. Where the Bengals are, they have a quarterback that has to make a play all the time and throw for 350 to 400 yards to win games against good teams. So they're doing it in different manners, but yeah, both playing at a real high level.
And the Chargers defense is so good at taking away those big plays, the throws downfield. Do you feel like this? I mean, obviously it's a tough matchup for the Bengals. Do you feel like this sets up for one of those dink and dunk days where it's going to be hard for them to score points?
I will say I think they've done a better job, and talking to Dan Pitcher yesterday, they've done a better job of moving Jamar all over the place in formations and then finding him a way to get him open kind of in those intermediate routes. And he made a good point of if teams want to jump him underneath the intermediate routes or grab him, is what he said. We'll throw to somebody over top of that. And if they don't, and he gets behind that, it gets into that second level where we're able to work him off of some of the formation stuff, get him the ball on the run. Well, then look out. And you saw that against Baltimore, that play right in the middle of the field, right down the seam on a kind of a crosser, and he takes it the rest of the way for a touchdown. And I think they've done a really good job of scheming that up. I think Justin Riscotti, who's the passing game coordinator who came from Minnesota, has helped with that some. I know Dan was really high on talking about what he has brought to the table, because one of the things that Minnesota was noted for, right, was being able to, and you heard all the time, why can't the Bengals scheme Jamar Chase open more? Why can Minnesota scheme Justin Jefferson open more? So Justin Riscotti's brought probably some of those ways to scheme him open more. And then if T. Higgins comes back and plays this week, whatever level that is, that's a huge, huge plus. It gives you finally a second weapon. They've really struggled to find that without T. I mean, Jermaine Burton got a bunch of snaps the other night. He did have a nice third down catch, but that was kind of it. Andre Yoshavash has almost disappeared entirely in this offense. And then really your second best, option at the moment without T has been Mike Gesicki, and that's fine and dandy, but you really don't want him to be the number two guy. You want it to be a wide receiver like T. Higgins. So get T back this week. You're probably not going to get downfield shots that you'd like to take, and you may have to take some of the shorter stuff, but I do think he gives you another receiver to help in those regards.
Any final thoughts on the Bengals here before we move on to college football?
No, and I know everybody comes to the must-win mantra. I'm not even there yet. Like I said, I 9-8 gets you in. You got a bunch of winnable games after this. This would be, to me, you go out and win this one, I think you take a huge step towards that, because I think you almost go steal one if you go win this one on the road.
Sure, you can stop watching, but let's be honest, you want to know more. Tap the links, or even better, click subscribe to stay in the know.